I'm Emily Clark, 29 years old. Nobody special, nobody special. I used to sleep on park benches and count coins to survive. I had no safety net, no one to call. Then came Nathan Parker, wealthy, powerful, untouchable. He offered me a deal marriage for money. I took it thinking I could protect my heart. I was wrong. This isn't just a story about a contract. It's about betrayal, redemption, and learning how to feel again. It's about how a broken girl and a broken man slowly built something real without meaning to. And it begins the night I said yes for all the wrong reasons. I never thought my life would change on a cold Tuesday night under the dim yellow glow of a broken street lamp. I sat there barefoot, hugging my knees against the concrete, counting the coins clinking in my plastic cup. That's when he appeared, Nathan Parker, millionaire, arrogant, untouchable. His polished shoes stopped right in front of my cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps." He didn't even look at me like I was human, just another broken thing he could buy and fix for fun. Then he opened his mouth and with one sentence shattered the last piece of dignity I had left. "Marry me for 3 months," he said. "I'll change your life." I still remember the bitter cold biting into my bones that night. The air felt sharp as broken glass slicing through the thin layers of clothing I had wrapped around myself. My fingertips were numb, curled inside the frayed sleeves of my sweater. I was sitting on the sidewalk, hugging my knees to my chest, pressing them so tightly it almost hurt just to feel something. Anything. The city pulsed around me with its indifferent life taxis, honking neon signs flickering above shuttered shops, laughter echoing from distant bars. None of it reached me. I was an island of silence and shadow amid the glowing chaos. I kept blinking, forcing my eyes open every few seconds. Sleep was dangerous out here. If I closed my eyes for too long, someone might steal the few coins I'd managed to collect that day, or worse. My cardboard sign sat propped against my shins, smudged and damp from the rain earlier. The black marker letters bled down the soggy brown surface in crooked streaks. Anything helps. Most people passed without even glancing at me. Their footsteps hurried and clipped faces turned away. Some looked at me with pity, their eyes darting quickly before guilt made them avert their gaze. Others looked at me with disgust, their lips curling as if my very presence offended them. But he didn't look at me like I was a person at all. I heard his polished shoes before I saw him, that deliberate, rhythmic click against the concrete. Expensive shoes sounded different, I'd learned. Heels that carried the arrogance of marble halls and mahogany boardrooms. I kept my head down, bracing myself for another dismissive command to move along. But then his shadow fell over me, blocking the yellowish glow of the street lamp above. Slowly, I lifted my gaze. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating from hunger and exhaustion. There he was, Nathan Parker, the Nathan Parker, millionaire, CEO, ruthless businessman whose name crawled across news tickers and hotel lobbies back when I still had a life. A man whose photographs filled magazine covers I used to flip through while waiting in grocery lines. He looked exactly as the media showed him, his tailored suit hugging his broad shoulders perfectly, every fold and stitch pristine. His hair was styled immaculately despite the restless breeze, each dark strand combed back with surgical precision. Under the flickering light, his icy blue eyes gleamed with a hard metallic sheen. "Excuse me," he said. There was nothing polite in his tone. His voice cut through the night air like a blade through silk, smooth, swift, leaving no room for questions. I blinked up at him, dazed and wary. Men like him didn't talk to women like me. Ever. For a fleeting second, I wondered if he was going to tell me to move, that I was ruining the aesthetic of his perfect city skyline. But then, without a hint of hesitation, he knelt down in front of me. His suit pants didn't even wrinkle. The scent of his cologne drifted into my space-crisp bergamot, layered over something deeper, darker, almost predatory. He was close enough that I could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, the tiny scar cutting through his right eyebrow, the way his pupils contracted slightly as he studied me. His eyes flicked over my tangled hair, plastered to my temples, my cracked lips swollen from cold and dehydration, the trembling hands clutching my ragged blanket. There was no softness in his gaze, no pity, no disgust. Only cold calculation, as though he were assessing a distressed property he intended to flip for profit. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind whipped between us, carrying scraps of newspaper and the distant echo of a siren. Then his lips curved into a half smirk. It wasn't kind. It wasn't cruel either. It was amused. As if the universe had just delivered him a puzzle he was eager to solve. And then he said the words that would rip my world apart and piece it back together in ways I never imagined. "Marry me for 3 months," he said, his voice low and certain. "I'll change your life." His words floated in the cold night air, unreal and glittering like shards of broken glass under moonlight. My mind struggled to process them. For a second, I almost laughed. Marry him, me, a homeless nobody in a damp alleyway, and him a man who could buy entire city blocks without blinking, but then I saw his eyes unwavering, lethal, unamused. He wasn't joking. In that moment, as my breath came in shallow bursts and the city spun behind him in blurry neon streaks, a single thought seared itself into my chest. This is it. Whatever it is, my life will never be the same again. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating from hunger. His words felt unreal, as if they drifted down from some twisted dream. "Marry me for 3 months," he repeated calmly, as if he were asking me to pass the salt at dinner. I blinked at him, my throat dry and raw. "I don't understand. Who are you?" His eyebrows arched slightly, almost amused. "Nathan Parker." The name hit me like a slap. Everyone knew who he was. Nathan Parker, the ruthless young CEO whose face graced magazine covers, whose mergers and acquisitions ruined companies overnight, whose fortune was worth more than the GDP of some small countries. I'd seen him once on a billboard downtown advertising a luxury condo development. He'd looked untouchable, then slick hair, cold blue eyes, tailored suit, and a smirk that screamed he owned the world. Now he was standing in front of me on a filthy city sidewalk offering me marriage. "This is insane," I whispered, shaking my head. My greasy hair fell over my eyes and I quickly pushed it back suddenly, hyper-aware of how I must look to him. Ragged jeans, oversized hoodie stained with old coffee shoes with holes so big my toes poked through. I probably smelled like stale sweat and street dust. His eyes didn't flinch. They roamed over me slowly, taking in every inch, and instead of disgust, I saw something far worse: indifference. "I don't joke about business," he said, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. "This is a straightforward proposition." I stared at him, my heart hammering painfully against my ribs. "Business. You're asking me to marry you for business." He knelt down in front of me, then expensive suit brushing the dirty concrete. I flinched instinctively, curling into myself. But he didn't touch me. He simply rested his elbows on his knees and tilted his head, studying me with unsettling focus. "I need someone like you," he said quietly, his voice lowering to something almost intimate. Almost. Someone no one will expect. Someone malleable. The word made me shiver. Malleable. Like clay. Like something he could shape and mold to his liking. "Why me?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "You don't even know me. You could hire an actress, a model, anyone." He shrugged, a small, careless movement. "Because you're here. Because I'm here." The answer echoed in my chest, heavy and humiliating. To him, I wasn't a person. I was a convenience, a means to an end. I felt something inside me snap. A small, bitter laugh slipped past my lips. And what exactly happens after 3 months? You just toss me aside and move on to your next project. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't name. Guilt, annoyance. Whatever it was, it disappeared as quickly as it came. You walk away with $1 million. No strings attached, $1 million. My mind spun. With that, I could pay off the debts that haunted me, rent a small studio apartment, buy proper clothes, maybe go back to college. Hell, I could just eat, sleep in a bed, take hot showers, be human again. For the first time in months, hope flickered in my chest like a weak candle, but it was immediately smothered by the dark cloud of reality. This sounds like a scam, I said, narrowing my eyes. Or something worse. His lips curved into a small, cold smile. If I wanted to hurt you, do you really think I'd ask you to marry me? The way he said it made me shiver. It wasn't reassurance. It was a statement of power. And what do you get out of this? I asked. What's in it for you? He paused for a moment, looking at me with those glacial blue eyes as if assessing how much truth I could handle. Finally, he said, "Consider it a personal project." I let out a trembling breath, clutching my blanket tighter. Everything about this felt wrong, dangerous. But then a sharp pain twisted in my stomach, reminding me I hadn't eaten all day. I thought of the dark alley I'd have to sleep in tonight, the rats scurrying past my face, the men who sometimes hovered too close. I thought of how I'd survived this long, of all the dignity I'd already lost. What was 3 more months? And if I say no? I asked, almost daring him. He rose to his feet smoothly, towering over me once again. For a second, I saw his expression flicker into something like disappointment, but it was gone in an instant. "Then you stay here," he said simply, and nothing changes. The finality in his tone sent a cold chill down my spine. I glanced around at the dark, empty street, at my pathetic plastic cup with its few coins, at the cardboard beneath me that was growing damp from the night air. My entire life reduced to a filthy patch of pavement. I swallowed hard, tears burning my eyes. Then I reached up my fingers, trembling, and took his outstretched hand. His grip closed around mine firmly, almost possessively, as he pulled me up to stand before him. "Good girl," he murmured, his voice low and smooth like poisoned honey. I wanted to slap him. I wanted to spit in his face, but instead I lowered my eyes and let him lead me away from the only life I'd known for the past 2 years. Deep down, a small, broken part of me whispered, "This is your chance. Don't screw it up." As we walked toward the sleek black car waiting at the curb, I felt the cold wind whip my face. I didn't look back at my spot on the sidewalk. I didn't want to see the last remnant of the woman I used to be. Because tonight I'd made a deal with the devil, and I knew there would be no turning back. I sat in the back seat of his sleek, black car, staring out the tinted window as the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, every beat echoing with a single question. What have I just agreed to? Nathan sat beside me, his eyes fixed on his phone screen thumb, scrolling rapidly as if I wasn't even there. The car smelled like leather and expensive cologne, a scent so foreign it made me dizzy. I pulled my knees up to my chest, wrapping my arms around them despite the seatbelt digging into my ribs. My oversized hoodie smelled of stale sweat and rain. I wondered if he could smell it too. After what felt like hours, the car finally pulled up in front of a towering glass building downtown. The valet opened my door, but I hesitated, gripping the seatbelt tightly. "Get out," Nathan said calmly, without looking up from his phone. I obeyed, my legs trembling as I stepped onto the marble driveway. Cold wind whipped my face, making my eyes water. The lobby was bright and silent, with gold accents and fresh white orchids lining the reception desk. People in suits moved past me, some giving me a quick glance before looking away, pretending not to notice the dirty homeless girl standing next to Nathan Parker. He didn't say a word as he led me to the elevator. When the door slid shut, trapping us in a mirrored box, I caught a glimpse of myself beside him. My reflection looked like a ghost, hollow cheeks, tangled hair, cracked lips. I didn't belong here, standing next to this immaculate man in his $1,000 suit. I looked at him, searching for any hint of humanity. He simply stared at the numbers above the elevator door, his jaw tight. The silence pressed down on me until I couldn't take it anymore. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered. He didn't even glance at me. "I told you, I need you." "For what?" I pressed, my voice trembling. "What am I to you?" Finally, he turned to me, his eyes locking onto mine. For a split second, I saw something flicker there, pain, regret, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "You're an investment," he said flatly. Before I could respond, the elevator dinged, and the door slid open to reveal a luxurious penthouse suite. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped inside. Plush cream carpets muffled my footsteps, floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a glittering panorama of the city, and elegant furniture in muted tones filled the massive living room. I felt so small, so wrong, like a stain on pristine white sheets. Nathan handed his phone to a sharply dressed man waiting by the door. "Bring up dinner and clothes." The man nodded and left without a word. Nathan loosened his tie, unbuttoned his cuffs, and poured himself a glass of whiskey at the bar. His movements were precise, controlled, almost mechanical. I stood near the door, hugging myself, unable to move. Every muscle in my body screamed to run. But where would I go? "Relax," he said, his voice smooth but devoid of any warmth. "I'm not going to hurt you. This is just part of the deal." Part of the deal. I wanted to scream. Instead, I watched as he sipped his drink, eyes scanning me up and down. Minutes later, there was a knock. A staff member wheeled in a covered tray of food and a shopping bag filled with clothes. The smell hit me first. Roasted chicken, creamy, mashed potatoes, warm bread rolls. My stomach cramped painfully. "Eat," Nathan ordered, sitting on the couch and scrolling through his phone again. I hesitated, then approached the tray. My hand shook as I lifted the silver cover, revealing the steaming food beneath. I didn't care about dignity anymore. I grabbed a roll and tore into it, the buttery warmth melting on my tongue. Tears pricked my eyes as I devoured the chicken, barely chewing, just swallowing greedily. Nathan watched me silently. When I finally slowed down, embarrassed, I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and glanced at him. His eyes were unreadable. "Feel better?" he asked. I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "Good. Go shower." He gestured to a door down the hall. "You smell like the street." His words stung more than I expected, but he wasn't wrong. I picked up the shopping bag and walked to the bathroom. The lights flickered on automatically, revealing marble floors, gold fixtures, and a bathtub the size of my old bedroom. I caught sight of myself in the mirror. For a moment, I just stood there staring at the gaunt girl with haunted eyes. Then I stripped off my filthy clothes and stepped under the hot spray of the shower. The water scalded my frozen skin, but I didn't care. I scrubbed myself until my skin was raw, as if I could wash away every mistake that had led me here. When I finally emerged wrapped in a fluffy white towel, I felt strangely numb. I dressed in the clean sweatpants and oversized t-shirt he'd provided, the fabric soft against my sore skin. For the first time in months, I felt human. Nathan was still in the living room, reading something on his laptop. He looked up as I approached, his eyes flickering over me quickly before returning to the screen. "Tomorrow," he said without looking at me, "we'll finalize the contract. The wedding will be the day after." My chest tightened painfully. "So soon? The sooner it's done, the sooner you get your money." I swallowed hard, feeling the walls of this gilded prison closing in on me. "Where do I sleep?" I asked quietly. He gestured to a door down the hall. "Bedroom's yours. You'll be safe there." I walked slowly to the room, feeling his gaze burn into my back. Inside, I found a king-sized bed covered in white linen soft pillows stacked high. It smelled like lavender and something clean and expensive. I crawled under the blankets and curled into a ball, staring at the dark ceiling above. Tears slid down my cheeks silently. I didn't know if I was crying from relief at finally being warm or from terror at what tomorrow would bring. That night, I fell asleep in a stranger's bed with the taste of roasted chicken still lingering on my tongue and the echo of his words in my head. "You're an investment." And for the first time in a long time, I wondered if my soul was worth the price. I thought I'd feel something panic, shame, maybe even a flicker of excitement. But as I stood in front of the cold courthouse mirror wearing a borrowed cream dress, all I felt was nothing. The dress had no soul, just like the ceremony we were about to walk into. Less than 48 hours had passed since I met Nathan Parker on a freezing sidewalk, and now I was about to become his wife. We barely spoke during the drive. He stared out the window, phone in hand, firing off emails and business commands like a man sealing deals, not marrying a stranger. I watched his reflection in the glass, trying to decipher his thoughts. But all I saw were walls. Cold, tall, impenetrable walls. The courthouse was exactly as I imagined it. Bland walls, flickering fluorescent lights, air thick with quiet misery. It smelled like old paper and surrender. We waited in silence as a judge reviewed the documents his lawyer had prepared overnight. Nathan's team moved quickly. Efficiency was their only language of affection. I stared at the floor, the hem of my dress brushing my ankles, fingers twisted tightly in my lap. "You're not marrying him," I reminded myself. "You're marrying freedom, a future, $1 million. But when the judge finally looked up and asked, "Do you take this man, Nathan Alexander Parker, to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I hesitated, just for a breath. Long enough for Nathan to glance at me, eyes cold but sharp, as if he noticed something shift. "I do," I whispered. He didn't blink. His "I do" sounded like a signature. Mechanical, polished, transactional. We signed the papers. His lawyer stamped them. The judge gave a curt nod. Just like that, I was no longer Emily Clark. I was Mrs. Emily Parker. No rings, no vows, no kiss. Just a hollow ritual in a gray room beneath fluorescent lights, surrounded by the echo of a million emotions I wasn't allowed to feel. When we stepped outside, sunlight hit my face, too bright, too harsh. Nathan placed a hand on the small of my back, guiding me to the waiting car. The touch was light, formal. Not affectionate, just protocol. I wanted to scream. Instead, I climbed into the car and stared out the window again, just like I had the day before, except now I wore his last name. Finally, I found my voice. "So what now?" I asked. "We go home?" He said, still not looking at me. "To the mansion. That's where you'll stay for the next 3 months. Home." The word caught in my throat. That mansion wasn't mine. It never would be. I was a guest in my own marriage. The Parker estate looked like it belonged in a magazine, iron gates, taller than most buildings, a driveway, lined with cherry blossom trees that had no business blooming in this season. And the house, it wasn't a house. It was a palace. White stone, tall columns, glass windows that glimmered like armor. Inside, a staff lined up like a receiving line. Nathan addressed them with clipped precision. "This is Emily. She'll be staying in the East Wing. Make sure she has everything she needs." The butler nodded. "Yes, Mr. Parker." No one looked me in the eye. I didn't know if it was because I didn't belong or because they already knew what this marriage was. By nightfall, I was escorted to a suite that could have fit 3 of my old apartments. Floor-to-ceiling windows, crisp white linens, a sitting area, a fireplace that sparked to life at the push of a button. But everything felt sterile, beautiful but cold. A gilded cage. That evening, Nathan invited me to dinner. The dining room was cavernous, our seats so far apart we had to raise our voices. He barely looked up from his plate. I studied him, frustrated at how unreadable he was. "How are you settling in?" he asked, slicing his steak with surgical precision. "I'm not used to this much space," I said, glancing around. "You'll get used to it," he replied, sipping wine. I forced a smile, but inside something twisted. Was that the plan? That I'd simply adapt to all this? After dinner, he walked me to my room. The silence between us stretched like a fragile thread. At the door, I turned to him. "Why are you really doing this?" I asked quietly. He leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "Because I can." The bluntness hit like a slap. I hated how calm he was, how calculated. I hated that I needed him more than he needed me. "This isn't normal," I said. "People don't buy marriages like assets." Nathan's eyes flicked slightly. People don't survive sleeping on sidewalks either. Yet, here we are. I had no reply. I couldn't argue with someone who only saw life through numbers and power. He gestured toward the door. "Get some rest. Tomorrow your transformation begins." Transformation, like I was a project, a possession. I stepped into the room and locked the door behind me without thinking. Then I collapsed onto the bed and stared up at the ceiling. I was a wife now, on paper, but I didn't feel married. I didn't feel anything. Only one thought echoed in the silence as I lay in the dark. I've sold myself. But for the first time in a long time, I might actually survive. I woke up in a bed that felt too big for someone like me. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows draped in sheer white curtains, casting soft golden rays across a room that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. No sirens, no shouting, no rustling of plastic bags from nearby tents. Just silence and the distant hum of wealth. I was in Nathan Parker's mansion. Technically his wife. On paper. But I didn't feel like a wife. I felt like a very well-dressed hostage. The room was too beautiful. Cream linens, polished hardwood, a closet full of designer clothes that somehow all fit me perfectly. I never gave anyone my measurements, but someone knew. Someone always knows when you're in Nathan Parker's world. After breakfast alone in a dining room large enough to host a wedding, I was introduced to Sophia, the head housekeeper. A tall, stern woman with silver hair and the posture of someone who'd served royalty. "Mr. Parker has scheduled your orientation," she said, hands clasped in front of her. "Today you'll meet your stylist, etiquette coach, and posture instructor. Each has been allotted 1 hour." I blinked. Orientation, Sophia didn't smile. "For your role." Right, my role. Not a person, a part. That day I was poked, prodded, dressed, and redressed. I learned to walk in heels I could barely stand in. I learned how to hold a champagne glass without leaving smudges. How to sit like a lady. How to smile with just the right amount of restraint. It felt like finishing school for the forgotten. And the worst part, I was good at it. By nightfall, I stared at myself in the mirror, unrecognizable. My hair was glossy and curled, my lips were tinted mauve. The dress hugged curves I didn't know I had. I looked expensive, but I didn't look like me. A few days later, I was practicing walking down the long marble hallway in heels when I sensed someone watching me. I turned and saw Nathan leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "How long have you been standing there?" I asked, breathless from the effort. "Long enough," he said. "You're improving." "Careful," I said dryly. That almost sounded like a compliment. He smiled slightly. Not smug, not cruel, just amused. "You're becoming someone they can't ignore," he said, "and it's not because of the dress." That stopped me. For the first time, his words didn't feel like control. They felt like recognition. After that, things started to shift. He began asking questions, real ones, what I studied before life unraveled, what music I liked, if I preferred the sea or the mountains. He didn't press when I dodged. He just listened. At dinners, he spoke to me like a person, not a project. He started noticing things when I was tired, when I was nervous before an event, when I preferred tea over coffee. He began bringing me to functions. I was introduced as Emily, my wife, and just like that, people treated me differently. No one saw the homeless girl from the sidewalk, just a polished woman on Nathan Parker's arm. Sometimes before stepping into a room, he'd lower his voice and ask, "You good?" And every time I nodded, because no matter how much I wanted to scream, I wasn't about to fall apart in public. But in private, something strange began happening. I'd catch Nathan watching me, really watching me. Not the way someone assesses their investment, but like he was trying to figure something out in himself. He'd linger in the doorway when I practiced posture. He'd pause before leaving a room like he wanted to say something and didn't know how. And once, just once, I saw him looking at me when he thought I wasn't looking back. And the look in his eyes wasn't cold. It was confused. And something else. Something dangerously close to soft. I should have kept my distance. I should have reminded myself this was all temporary. 3 months, $1 million, and out. But I couldn't lie. I wasn't the same girl who'd shivered on a sidewalk. And Nathan Parker wasn't the man I'd met that night either. Something was changing in him, in me. And that terrified me more than anything. It started with a locked door. I wasn't snooping, at least that's what I told myself. But something about that particular room near Nathan's office had always bothered me. The doorknob was different, polished, untouched, too perfect in a house where perfection was already the norm. One night after dinner, Nathan received a call and left abruptly. I watched him disappear down the hall, distracted and agitated, 2 things he rarely allowed himself to be. I should have gone to bed. Instead, I wandered. The house was silent, the staff gone for the evening, and my heels echoed like a warning against the marble floors. The door was unlocked, just slightly ajar. Curiosity pulled me in before fear had time to whisper. Inside the room was cold, clinical. A private office, minimalist design, a sleek wooden desk, a few shelves lined with leather-bound ledgers and perfectly aligned files. I shouldn't have opened the drawer, but I did. And there it was, a folder labeled Clark Project. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were printed emails, contracts, even photos of me before, sleeping on a bench, begging outside a coffee shop. I flipped through the pages, heart pounding. Then I saw the exchange. "Michael, so has she agreed yet?" "Nathan, yes. It's only a matter of time before I win." The words blurred. My stomach turned. This wasn't just a twisted arrangement. It was a bet. A damn bet. I grabbed the folder, unable to breathe, and bolted for the hallway. As I turned the corner, I slammed into something solid, someone. Nathan. His eyes dropped to the folder in my arms. In that split second, I saw it in his face. Not surprise, not confusion, guilt. "What are you doing in there?" he asked, voice low and sharp. I shoved the folder into his chest. "Answer me, Nathan. Was this all a game to you?" He didn't speak right away. And that silence, it was louder than any confession. "Say something," I shouted. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair, a crack forming in his usual composure. "It's not what it looks like." "Really?" I snapped. "Because what it looks like is that you made a bet with your rich little friend about turning a homeless girl into your trophy wife. And you're winning." His jaw clenched. "Emily." "Don't," I cut him off. "Don't say my name like it means something." He reached for me, but I stepped back. Everything in me was shaking. I didn't know if it was rage or heartbreak or both. "You let me believe I was safe here," I whispered. "You looked me in the eyes, Nathan." You asked me if I was okay. You told me I mattered. But I was never a person to you, was I just a game? His expression twisted, something like pain flickering beneath his usual steel. It started that way, he admitted, but it changed. I let out a bitter laugh. Changed. Do you want credit for that? For catching feelings halfway through your little social experiment? He didn't answer. He didn't deny it either. I shook my head, tears burning in the corners of my eyes. You said you needed someone. What you meant was you needed someone easy to control, disposable, forgettable. I never saw you as disposable, he said quietly. I looked at him, and for the first time I saw the truth. He was powerful, brilliant, and utterly broken. A man raised in a world where vulnerability was currency and everything had a price. Even love. Especially love. I trusted you, I said. God help me. I actually started to believe you were different. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't stop. Not when he called after me. Not when he said my name again this time, like it meant everything. I ran to my room, slammed the door, and packed what little I had. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I climbed out a window. The cold air slapped my face like a warning. The climb down was shaky, barefoot, silent. When my feet hit the grass, I ran. Past the garden, past the gate. I didn't look back. Hours later, I was curled up on a bench in a downtown subway station. My thin jacket barely shielded me from the biting air. The million-dollar wife alone again. No cameras, no diamonds, no Nathan, just Emily. And this time, the silence wasn't luxurious. It was survival. I didn't sleep that night. The cold bled into my bones like a slow punishment, curling around every inch of me as I lay curled on that subway bench, hard, unforgiving, yet still more merciful than what I'd left behind. My body ached, my throat dry, and my mind refused to quiet. I didn't regret leaving him. I only regretted letting him in. Nathan Parker had shattered something in me I didn't even know was still fragile. And somewhere in that polished marble mansion of his, I imagined him sipping espresso, perfectly composed, already moving on, already constructing his next performance. But I was wrong. While I shook alone under a city street lamp, Nathan was unraveling. When I didn't appear for breakfast, he assumed I needed air. But when the staff said they hadn't seen me since dinner, his facade cracked. The phone slipped from his hand and shattered against the tile. He didn't ask questions. He stormed into my room, untouched bed, open closet window wide like a silent scream. No hesitation, no chauffeur, no assistant, just him, his car, and the panic clawing up his throat. He searched the park where we first met, the alley I used to call home, every shelter, every dark corner of the city. His sleek car sliced through the streets like desperation had given it wings. By noon, I had found temporary shelter at a women's clinic. Someone offered me hot coffee and a blanket. They asked gentle questions, I fed them lies. I didn't want help. I wanted silence. Just a moment to breathe. But even that didn't last. Because hours later, he found me. He stood in the doorway like a ghost, hair unkempt, suit, wrinkled eyes red, rimmed from lack of sleep. And in that moment, he didn't look like the billionaire who ruined me. He looked like a man who'd lost something he never thought he could lose. He saw me and moved before I could move away. His voice broke around my name. Emily. I stood too fast, spilling coffee down my sleeve. Don't. His hands lifted in surrender, cautious, trembling. Please, let me talk. There's nothing left to say. There's everything, he said, stepping forward. I looked at him, really looked at him, and all I felt was rage rising from some deep, scorched place. What do you want to apologize or perform again so your ego can sleep at night? He winced. And that reaction, real unguarded, felt more jarring than all his charm ever had. "I never should have made that bet," he said, voice rough. "It was cruel. I didn't see you. I only saw the challenge. But then what I snapped. You started to pity me." "No," he said, his voice quiet, trembling. "I started falling for you." The words stung, slicing through the numbness. I stared at him, heart pounding. "You don't get to say that. Not after everything. Love isn't your get-out-of-jail-free card." "I'm not using it as one," he said, stepping closer. "I didn't even realize what I felt until you were gone." And then it was all I felt. Tears blurred the room, but I didn't let them fall. "You used me. You twisted my pain into some sick experiment. You watched me come undone and called it progress." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "And if I could undo it, I would. But I can't. I can only be honest now. I'm not the same man who made that bet." I laughed, bitter and hollow. "It's only been weeks, Nathan. People don't change that fast." "I didn't change overnight," he said, "but I started. And I started because of you." I looked away. My breath was shallow, uneven. "You're saying all the right things, but I don't trust you. I don't know if I ever will." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said gently. "I'm asking for a chance. Just one. No games, no contracts. Just you and me, honest. Real." The room went quiet, and I did the one thing I swore I wouldn't do. I looked at him, and this time I didn't see the billionaire. I didn't see the manipulator. I saw a man, undone eyes, desperate voice, trembling, no longer trying to win, but trying to rebuild. Not with power, but with vulnerability. I stepped forward slowly, heart still wary, voice barely above a whisper. "If I come back, it's on my terms. You don't speak for me. You don't control what this is. You don't get access to me unless I open the door. Understand?" His gaze didn't waver. Completely. I nodded once. "And if you lie to me again, Nathan, I'll burn it all down." Through the pain, he smiled. "Fair enough." Then, without a word, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. My hands hesitated before taking it. The contract. Ripped clean in half. Signed, voided. "No more deals," he said. "Only choices." And for the first time since that freezing night on the sidewalk, I felt like I finally had one. I told him I needed space, and this time, he didn't chase me. After everything that happened after the confrontation, the torn contract, the hollow words about love, I walked out of that women's clinic with nothing but a half-empty tote bag, a bottle of water, and a storm clawing at my chest. He said he loved me. He said things had changed. But how do you trust a man who once wagered your life like a poker chip? I wandered the city for hours. My legs ached, my thoughts spiraled, but I kept walking, not toward anything, just away. Away from the lies, the pain, the confusion. I kept moving because I was afraid that if I stopped, the truth would catch up and it would break me. But pain always does. And by sundown, the adrenaline had drained from my system. The exhaustion I'd been outrunning finally caught up. My body, still brittle from weeks of pretending to be strong, began to shut down. I stumbled into a quiet park, collapsed onto a bench, and folded into myself like a paper doll left out in the rain, too proud to call for help, too empty to cry. Then I heard it. My name, soft but urgent, cutting through the fevered fog. "Emily." I didn't open my eyes. I didn't need to. I knew that voice, knew it through every ounce of rage and grief. It was Nathan. And before I could even process it, I felt him drop to his knees beside me. The shift in the ground, the panic in his breath, real panic, not rehearsed, not calculated, just raw. "Emily, look at me," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "You're okay. You're going to be okay." I shook my head weakly, too far gone to speak. He touched my forehead, and I heard him suck in a sharp breath. "You're burning up." Then everything blurred. I was in his arms, weightless, trembling, my cheek pressed against his chest, where his heart pounded like it was fighting for both of us. He carried me to his car, speaking to me even when I couldn't answer. Doors slammed, the engine roared, then darkness swallowed everything. When I woke, I was wrapped in clean sheets, surrounded by the soft beeping of machines and the antiseptic sharpness of a hospital room. My body was heavy, but I wasn't alone. Nathan sat beside me, slumped in a chair, unshaven eyes bloodshot. His suit was wrinkled, his shoulders sagging like the weight of the world had finally caught up. "Hey," he whispered when he saw me stir. "You're awake?" I blinked slowly, still hazy. "Where's St. Clair's?" he said gently. "You were dehydrated, feverish, your blood pressure tanked, you collapsed." I tried to sit up, but he reached out, steady but gentle. "Don't. You need rest." I looked at him, at the desperation beneath the fatigue. "You found me. I never stopped looking," he said. After the clinic, I drove street by street. "I knew you wouldn't go far. I just prayed I wasn't too late." His voice cracked at the edges. And for a man like Nathan, whose entire life was about precision and control, it meant everything. I studied his face, not the billionaire, not the strategist, just a man who looked like he hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't breathed since I left. "You shouldn't have come," I said, turning my face toward the wall. "I had to," he replied simply. I closed my eyes, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I ran because I didn't even know who I was anymore. I didn't trust myself. How could I ever trust you? He didn't argue, didn't beg, just sat quietly before speaking again. "You were surviving long before I showed up. You didn't need saving. I did, and I still do." I didn't answer, but I didn't let go of his hand either. The nurse came in and checked my vitals. He stepped aside respectfully, then sat again, quieter now, but no less present. "I'm not going anywhere," he murmured. "Not unless you ask me to." That night I drifted in and out of sleep, and each time I opened my eyes, he was still there, sometimes holding my hand, sometimes just watching me breathe. Not out of obligation, not to earn points, but because somehow he wanted to. Because maybe now he finally saw me. In the morning when the doctor told me I could be discharged in a couple of days, Nathan turned to me and asked softly, "Where do you want to go?" There was no pressure in his voice, no underlying motive, just a question, a choice. I met his gaze, measured and tired. Somewhere quiet, somewhere that doesn't have marble floors and staff listening outside the door. His lips curved into the gentlest smile I'd ever seen on him. I know just the place. And for the first time since the night he found me on that freezing sidewalk, I actually believed him. I didn't expect peace. Not after everything we'd been through. But somehow I found it. After being discharged from the hospital, Nathan didn't take me back to the mansion. Instead, he brought me to a small cottage tucked away in the hills outside the city, nothing like the glass palace he called home. No staff, no gold-plated fixtures, just quiet wind and the scent of pine trees. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The cottage was warm and modest. A fireplace crackled softly. A small bookshelf lined the wall. There was a cozy reading nook by the window and a tiny kitchen with mismatched mugs. It felt real, like something human hands had built. He didn't stay with me, at least not in the same room. He took the couch, kept his distance, gave me space. He cooked simple meals, brewed tea instead of coffee, because he remembered I liked the smell better. He barely spoke unless I did, and I found myself watching him. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I was starting to see the cracks in his armor and what lived beneath them. One afternoon, while he was out buying groceries, I wandered into the little study next to the bedroom. It was filled with notebooks, half-used sketch pads, and one small box labeled letters I never sent. I didn't open the box, but on the desk there was something else. A book, hardcover, plain brown jacket, no title. Curious, I flipped it open, and there tucked between the pages was a folded sheet of paper with my name written on the front. Emily, in his handwriting, firm, clear. I hesitated, then unfolded it. Emily, if you're reading this, I'm not in the room, and that's on purpose. I didn't want to watch your face when you read these words. I didn't want to influence how you felt. For once, I want to be silent and let you see the truth without me standing over it. I don't know how to say this in the right way. I've rewritten this letter more times than I'll admit. Every version sounded like a defense, and you don't need another one of those. So here's just the truth. When I met you, I didn't see you. I saw an opportunity, a game, a way to win. But somewhere between our silence and your defiance, you changed everything. You didn't bend to the world I tried to force on you, you pushed back. You asked the questions no one else dared to. You challenged my comfort, my beliefs, my rules, and then you broke them. I've spent my life hiding behind glass cold, clear, untouchable. But you cracked it with every look, every word, every time you chose truth over comfort. I never deserved your trust, but I want to earn it now. I want to become the man who tears down the walls he built to keep others out. Not for you, but because you showed me I could. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to stay. But I needed you to know this. You were never the project. You were the mirror. And I'm finally seeing who I am. By the time I finished reading, my hands were trembling. Not because the words were perfect, but because they weren't. They were raw, honest, uneven in places, human. I folded the letter carefully, holding it against my chest. The tears didn't fall dramatically. They came silently, slowly, because for the first time I believed him. Not because he said all the right things, but because finally he wasn't trying to win me. He was just trying to be real. When he returned that evening, I didn't mention the letter. I just met him at the door, took the bag from his hands and asked, "Did you remember the mint tea?" He smiled, caught off guard. "Yeah, and honey." I nodded, turning toward the kitchen. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt the beginning of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The days passed slowly, like softened pages in a book left open too long. Nothing dramatic happened. No grand gestures, no sweeping declarations. Just small things, quiet things. And somehow those were the ones that mattered most. Nathan never spoke about the letter I found. He didn't bring it up, didn't ask what I thought. I half expected him to hover, to wait, to hope. But instead, he just let me be. He started waking earlier than me. I'd hear him in the kitchen boiling water for tea, not coffee. Always mint. Always 2 mugs. One for me, even when I didn't join him. He began asking questions, but not the kind he used to. Not strategic, not polite. He asked if I slept well. If I'd read anything lately? What I thought about the rain that morning, or if I preferred it over sunlight. He didn't ask to fix me. He asked to know me. And when I didn't answer, he didn't push. I noticed how he listened differently now. He didn't interrupt. He didn't fill the silence with solutions. When I spoke, even if it was something simple, like how I used to love painting before life fell apart, his attention didn't drift. He held it like something fragile, like something earned. One morning, I found him in the garden behind the cottage sleeves, rolled hands buried in damp earth. He was planting something poorly, awkwardly, but with a surprising kind of care. I stood there watching from the porch, arms crossed, unsure whether to laugh or help. When he looked up and saw me, he wiped his hands on his jeans and said almost sheepishly that he thought we could grow something ourselves. Not just herbs or flowers. Hope. He didn't say that last word, but it hung in the air between us. That night, I caught him sitting with a notebook in the living room, scribbling something down. I asked what he was working on, and he said it was a proposal to fund a program for women transitioning out of homelessness. I didn't ask if it was because of me. I didn't need to. I could already feel the weight behind it, not guilt, but awareness. He showed me the draft a few days later, and for the first time since the day we met, he said something that left me completely still. I don't want to do this for you. I want to do it with you, if you'll let me. That simple shift with instead of for was everything. So I agreed, slowly, cautiously, but I agreed. We started visiting organizations together, shelters, youth programs, art therapy spaces. I watched him walk into each place like he didn't know how to act anymore, and that was a good thing. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to understand. And the strange part, people liked him more when he stopped trying to be likable. There were still moments when his walls crept back up, when his tone turned clipped or he tried to take over, but now when I raised an eyebrow or said, "Not like that," he actually stopped, listened, learned. I wasn't falling back into his arms. I wasn't ready for that. But I was beginning to believe that the man before me wasn't just Nathan Parker, the millionaire who made a bet. He was also the man who woke early to make tea for someone who might not come downstairs. The man who sat quietly beside women telling stories of survival, not speaking, just holding space. The man who now asked before reaching for my hand. And maybe the small things weren't small at all. It wasn't fireworks, no grand gestures, no rose petals scattered across the floor, or a string quartet playing in the background. Just a quiet evening, the kind that doesn't try to impress, but somehow ends up being unforgettable. We were still at the cottage, the little place tucked between pines and silence that had, without any formal declaration, become ours. Home not because we said it out loud, but because we stopped saying anything at all. The kind of place where time moved slower and trust somehow grew like moss on old wood. That night, the air outside was cool and clean, brushed with the scent of rain that hadn't yet arrived. I was curled up on the porch legs tucked beneath me, a thick knit blanket wrapped around my shoulders, one of the ones Nathan had brought home from town the week before, saying only, "It looked like something you'd like." He stepped out, carrying 2 mugs of tea, and without a word, handed me one. His fingers brushed mine, just a moment of warmth, no ceremony to it, but it lingered. He sat down beside me, close but not imposing, and for a long time we didn't speak. We just watched the trees sway gently under a violet sky as the last of the sun melted behind the hills, turning clouds gold and pink and soft around the edges. Then quietly, he broke the silence. "I've been thinking about something," he said, voice low, uneven, in a way I wasn't used to hearing from him. I didn't answer. I just waited. "I don't know when it changed," he continued, "when this became more than redemption. Maybe it was that first night you laughed in this house. Or the way you paint, like you're pouring pieces of yourself into every stroke. Or maybe it was always there, and I was too blind to see it." He set his mug down and turned toward me. No rehearsed posture, no polished expression. Just him, raw and open. "Emily," he said, "I know I don't deserve a future with you based on where we started, but I don't want to keep living like we're on borrowed time. Not anymore." And then he reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out something small, not a dramatic velvet ring box, but a soft pouch. He opened it and held out a thin gold band, delicate and understated, set with a single opal. No diamonds, no flash, just quiet beauty like the kind of love that doesn't scream but stays. His hand stayed open between us, and when he spoke, it was barely more than a whisper. "Will you marry me?" he asked, not because of a contract, not to fix anything, just because I love you. Because I want to wake up every day beside the person who makes me want to be better than I was the day before. The wind stilled. So did my breath. And for the first time in what felt like forever, so did my heart. He didn't rush to explain himself, didn't fill the air with more words. He just looked at me steady, letting the silence speak too, letting me choose. And I did. I didn't say yes at first, not because I was unsure, but because my throat had tightened with something too big for words. Instead, I reached forward with trembling fingers, lifted the ring from his palm, and slid it on. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. When I finally found my voice, it came out in a whisper. Yes, but this time we write our own vows. No scripts, no performances, just us. The look on his face wasn't victory. It wasn't relief. It was something deeper. A gratitude born not from getting what he wanted, but from knowing what it meant to almost lose it. He didn't kiss me right away. He took both my hands, held them like they were sacred, and pressed his forehead against mine as the last of the light faded and the stars began to bloom above us. There were no crowds, no cameras, no one else to witness it, but the night and the trees and the wind. Just me and the man who once broke me, and then piece by piece stayed long enough to help me rebuild. This time, it was real. The second wedding bore no resemblance to the first. Gone were the sterile courthouse walls, the impersonal vows, the cold signatures exchanged under fluorescent lights. This time, everything was different, smaller, quieter, and yet infinitely more real. It wasn't about appearances or ego or proving anything. It was about two broken souls who had bled, bruised, forgiven, and chosen each other wholly and honestly. We stood in the backyard of the cottage Nathan had brought me to once during a time when trust was still a luxury I couldn't afford. Now that same space was wrapped in blooming wildflowers, the vines climbing like promises kept. The sun dipped low, casting a golden hue over the field. There was no orchestra, no spectacle, just the rustling of leaves and the murmur of our guests, a small group of people who had become threads in our new life, Clara Lily and a few others we'd helped along the way. I walked down the petal-strewn path in a hand-sewn dress, its hem kissed with brush strokes of color I'd painted myself. Nathan waited at the end of it, not as the billionaire with a bet to win, but as a man stripped of armor ready to begin again. He looked at me the way you look at something precious, like he still couldn't believe I was real. And as I reached him, he took my hands with a quiet reverence, like I was something he didn't want to break. When the officiant gave us the floor, Nathan spoke first. His voice trembled low and intimate, meant for no one else but me. He confessed that he had once seen love as something transactional, a currency to be used, manipulated, discarded. But somewhere along the way, I had shattered that belief. My presence, my pain, my refusal to bend to his rules had awakened something dormant in him. He no longer asked for forgiveness. He asked only for the chance to stand beside me as an equal to build a life rooted in truth, not power. I held his gaze as I responded, my throat tight. I spoke not just to him, but to the frightened, discarded version of myself I'd once been. I told him how I had once felt invisible, reduced to nothing but pity or judgment. I had hated him for seeing me as a project, a pawn, but I had hated myself more for craving visibility. Over time, though, he had learned to truly see me not as something to be fixed, but as someone to be known. And because of that, I had found myself again. There were no dramatic tears, no swooning, just a quiet, breaking open of wounds, of pride, of hearts. We slipped on the rings we had chosen together, simple bands forged by hand, each imperfection a mark of intention. When Nathan leaned in to kiss me, it wasn't a performance. It was a homecoming. That evening, under the glow of string lights and a moon that seemed unusually generous, we danced barefoot on the grass. Clara laughed beside us. Lily clutched her scholarship letter in one hand and a glass of sparkling cider in the other. Somewhere a record played old jazz, the music drifting across the field like smoke. Later, I found Nathan sitting alone on the porch steps, his tie undone his shoes, kicked off a soft fatigue in his posture that came not from stress, but from surrender. I sat beside him, leaned my head on his shoulder and whispered, "We did it." He didn't respond right away. He just held my hand tighter and said quietly, "No, you did. You made me human again." And in that moment, everything felt still. I used to believe that happy endings didn't belong to people like me, people who had been tossed aside, who had failed too many times to count. But I was wrong. Sometimes happiness doesn't come with trumpets and roses. It arrives quietly years late, wearing scars and bearing truths. But when it comes, it stays. This wasn't the ending I'd imagined. It was better, because it was real.